So I don't talk about, hey, you should be a climate company, you should fix the climate. I'm talking about if there is a climate impact in some corner of the world or even in your geographical location, your business finances will be impacted. So it's not about climate risk, it's about climate being a factor when not um, fixed in the proper way, impacting your own finances, your own company. For example, I'll take California, right? Several California businesses and houses are uninsurable because of climate risk. So no one wants to go to certain locations in Florida or California, as an example, to do business because of climate risk. It's not about you being a climate company, it's about what is the impact of climate to your business and your profits if you don't pay attention.
You're listening to Foreign Founders, where we tell stories of immigrant and international founders who are working tirelessly to shape the future. We share stories of their upbringing, culture, and background, and explore the companies and products they're building. We want to highlight these founders because these are stories that are often not told. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome to Foreign Founders. I'm delighted to introduce Bhuva Shakti to the show. She's a founder of several ventures, including Bhuva's Impact Global and WalletMax. She's a startup advisor and an angel investor. Bhuva's Impact Global is a financial sustainable innovation advisory firm built for women and non-binary business owners. Through her work and company, she believes that advancement in social good do not have to come at the expense of a business's bottom line. Welcome to Foreign Founders, Bhuva.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for this opportunity, and I'm excited to be here today.
I'm excited to have you on the show, and maybe we can start out with the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
Yes. So my upbringing was in a remote corner of India. I did not have any internet, no phone, no television, nothing digital, nothing real time. So we relied more on, newspapers. You remember those days in print? They would come once a week in a local language and in English. That's it, two papers. And that's where my journey started. So I got a lot of interest in learning about local and global happenings with those two newspapers that come once a week to me. That kind of really pushed me to, self-learn multiple languages because I wanted to read several different language newspapers. That's the only way to learn about the world outside of my local small remote corner. Um, I also took up a lot of hobbies while my peers in my age group were focused on playing and relaxing. I think I was slightly different because scarcity of knowledge and also the availability, the timing, everything was very limited. So I really had to, triple down my efforts to find a lot of books, read a lot of books. I had to literally go to a nearby town library. I also remember sometimes I've had to wait few months to get the books that I had wanted. So that's my early years, childhood, I would say. And then that kind of pushed me to read a lot of books. I still, till date, that's still one of my passion. I also remember reading the Guinness Book of World Records or the encyclopedia, cover to cover, every single year. I used to, read them. But that doesn't mean I was just only with books, because when you grow up with scarcity of so many things, you literally try to build up your expertise in many areas, not necessarily specialize in one because you want to know about everything to find out what really interests you as you grow up. So I've also dabbled a lot in creative arts, crafts, painting. I've done sports a lot in school. And one of those times when I was in school is when I heard about United Nations, right? So because when you're in a remote corner of the world, the only global organization you hear about a lot is United Nations, right?
Right.
so on their departments and things like that. So then I kind of thought that really connected me to the world outside of my corner. So I used to follow a lot on the United Nations, what they do, how they help my own local community. And that really evolved me into more like, I would say, I was more like an activist for change. Because if they had not come to some of our rural areas, we would never had many opportunities, right? So I uphold United Nations as a very big factor in my transformation, both in the past and today. Even today, I do a lot of work with them. And in fact, my Climate Week conference that's coming up in September this year is also aligned to the United Nations Climate Week and sustainability goals. So that's how I'm very much impacted by them. But I would also say my goal is to impact change predominantly for women and girls, because I think that was a catalyst for me when I was growing up, where I had seen a lot of things that were not offered because you are of a certain gender or a race, right? So I think my focus is how I can give equal opportunities for women, uplift them, and continue to pay forward. So later I landed on Wall Street in US, in New York City, from one remote corner to another big Apple, where I knew nothing. And I started working at an investment bank. I just had $80 in my pocket. And if I recall today, I know there was this fearless girl statue on Wall Street. Many times I walked through that, and I used to think of myself a
You
lot.
felt
I
like
mean,
that girl.
a lot, a lot. Yeah, because as an outsider, it takes a lot to be part of the crowd, And
Yeah.
yeah, so I've always felt like search for knowledge, but standing up for women's rights are like two pillars for my life.
And do you know if that developed thirst for knowledge, the yearning to see the world or experience the world through initially through the newspapers that you're getting, weekly? Did that come from anyone in your family?
I would not say that. I am a first generation in many ways in my family. But what I had was enormous support to pursue what I wanted, when I wanted, and where I wanted. And that, I think, drove me to explore things that were not the norm in those days for girls and women of color in my remote corner. But I would think most of my breaking barriers came from the support I had within my immediate family than anything else.
And when you came to Wall Street, you was that before or after you studied computer science?
So I would say I have done um, half and half. So I studied computer science for a very long time in various aspects. And I had done some of my learning in India, and then I had continued my education in US. But I started working first, and then I went back to Columbia Business School.
Got it. Why did you decide to study computer science? What was it in that field that attracted you to working in that and then eventually going to Wall Street or around that time going to Wall Street? And then
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, I did not think I will be on Wall Street when I started studying computer science. But like I said, I always had this thirst for knowledge, but I was also always looking for new things, new trends. So whenever those newspapers came, I'm always looking at the science and technology section or business section. So those are like things that interested me the most, because I'd like to play with new things. If some new innovation comes, I want to know what it is and how I can get access to it. But then, um, it literally takes several years for new technologies to reach my corner of the world. I don't know if you can relate to that, but I remember very clearly where there will be a small school nearby. I have to stand in line for hours to get a 30-minute usage of a big computer. The computer will occupy half the size of that room. I was just learning Fortran and COBOL with just Unix and command line. But I know at that point in time when I was learning those in my corner, already the rest of the world has moved on to Windows, Mac, and graphical user interface, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Right. So, in a way, it was advantageous because I know both hardware and software in computers, so I can do both. But on the other hand, I was really far behind in the advancement in the field when people in the US are playing with the latest PCs, personal computers with graphical user interface and Windows. Those are like big things for me. So that's why
Leaps
I wanted.
in technology.
Yes. Yes, yes. So, but still, I would think I know a lot of basics better than anyone learning computers today because we learned from the bare minimum. So that's pushed me into learning computer science and data engineering. I was always fascinated by numbers. And I did that even before, internet was invented or even Google existed. So I think those foundations really helped me to come on Wall Street and not try to, um, think that I know everything already, but rather I started from the basics because I've had a 26-year long career on Wall Street. But in my early years, I was working predominantly for large investment banks or global trading platforms, right? So to survive and also thrive as an outsider, it not only requires a technical skill. So you have to know the business. So no one was there to teach me business. So I self learned that. I think that's because from a young age, I'm always self learned new things. So I learned finance, I learned business, I learned how Wall Street works, I learned what's trading, how it's done globally, how the data impacts real time, both at micro and macro level. And I got a specific interest in the compliance industry also, because whenever we used to develop something, I know some of our chief officers at the bank used to say, hey, does this meet the regulations in the local market, in the global market? So then I shifted my focus to specifically specialize in risk and compliance for local and global markets and ensure we are able to scale up our solutions in terms of bringing to the market and scaling to a different geography. So I think the best way, in my view, to overcome obstacles as a single woman of color in many Wall Street rooms. For many, many years, I've been one person, one person of my type and kind. And I had to work literally 10 times harder to strengthen my skills in all areas of business. And I think that comes from my early years of thirst for knowledge and self learning and trying to keep pushing for my own space. So I think that
And
helped quite a lot.
that's a great segue into, you had this long career, 26 years, you said, in Wall Street,
Yes.
and going into Bhuva's global impact. Uh, what what is it, and what do you do with the
Yes.
company?
It's Bhuva's Impact Global. I kind of
Sorry about that.
got an acronym for BIG because I was thinking Bhuva's Impact Global means big impact, change, big transformation, big innovation. That was what I was going for. Like I said, I have always had an interest in women's rights. And I wanted to pay it forward because over a 26-year long career on Wall Street, I've learned a lot, I've achieved a lot. But then at some point, you think, okay, what am I going to do next? Am I going to repeat the same thing again for another year? Or is it time for me to take my knowledge, take my accomplishments, and pay forward to the next generation that's coming up that needs more support, that may have additional support from people like me, and they don't have to struggle through many obstacles like I have and many others before me have. So that's why I launched my own startup called Bhuva's Impact Global. I predominantly want to expand the same financial and technical expertise that I had into areas that were not of focus few years back. Like, for example, I wanted to expand finance into the financial inclusion space. Not a lot of people were talking about that. I want to expand the risk and compliance work that I was doing on Wall Street into climate risk and climate compliance space. Because to me, um, and so since coming from Wall Street, I don't think I'm talking about nonprofits because that's one of the misconceptions people have with Bhuva's Impact Global. What I want to do is you can still have profits and still care for people and planet, not that you don't have to give up financial inclusion and climate compliance for
Yeah.
making money or not making money. And that's why I started that.
And do you think that com- uh, two concepts get mixed up often? And are people, when you talk to C-suite levels or founders who are thinking about working with you, is that usually the hesitation that they have is like, I would love to do the social good, think about the climate, think about DEI, think about, you know, ESG, but my fiduciary duty for, my investors are XYZ. Like, is that the number one pushback that you see?
Yes, yes. Because, and that is my primary mission also, because people think financial inclusion immediately as, okay, it's in some corner of some emerging market. It's a need. It's not in the United States. It's not in Wall Street, where I come from. But financial inclusion is a very important part. For example, many people, if you are women or women of color, even in United States, in New York City, may not get the required financial services or support in terms of a credit card or insurance policy, or even to start their own business, funding for their business. If you are not included in the ecosystem. So there are systemic biases that exist, which have been getting automated recently, which continue the systemic bias and not necessarily expand financial access to everyone who deserves it equally, right? So that's a big question. So when people think about financial inclusion for everyone, then they think, oh, I have to take a cut on my profits. No, you're going to expand your business reach to the remaining 50% of the population that's overlooked at this point. So you're going to ensure they become additionally your customers rather than you just serving only the 50% that has been your in the customer base for a quite long time. So that's what I say. Financial inclusion is not about some change in a remote emerging market. It's about expanding your access of your products and services to set of market that is overlooked in your community here in the United States also, though there is a larger need globally as well, right? In terms of climate, definitely again, right? So I don't talk about, hey, you should be a climate company, you should fix the climate. I'm talking about if there is a climate impact in some corner of the world or even in your geographical location, your business finances will be impacted. So it's not about climate risk. It's about climate being a factor when not um, fixed in the proper way, impacting your own finances, your own company. For example, I'll take California, right? Several California businesses and houses are uninsurable because of climate risk. So no one wants to go to certain locations in Florida or California, as an example, to do business because of climate risk. It's not about you being a climate company. It's about what is the impact of climate to your business and your profits if you don't pay attention. So I think that's the conversation I like to have about financial inclusion and climate action.
So tactically, when people are working with you, in what capacity do you go into a certain organization, or at what stage are you usually working with these companies?
So I've done financial inclusion with early stage and seed stage companies at startups. But for climate work, I typically focus on Series A, B, or even corporations because financial inclusion needs a change at the grassroots level, whereas climate action requires intensive capital, which is possible only when you go higher up in the financial sector.
I see. Can I ask about some of the things that the companies are doing in the climate space or climate inclusion? For example, I am a layperson in terms of like what's happening in the corporate world with climate, but in the last few years, you hear a lot around um, buying credit, selling credit, all that stuff. So, what are some of the trends that you see that are happening where corporations are incorporating into their uh, company?
Sure. I can give you, let's say, three examples across climate, fintech, and artificial intelligence that I typically work. And then if you need more examples, happy to share. So one of the things that I've done working with corporates is they have a lot of data from the legacy platforms and they are trying to be ESG compliant. You know, the new SEC law is coming, there are regulations in US, UK, Europe, and everywhere. So big enterprises and big investment banks, literally some of the banks on Wall Street are thinking about how can I leverage my existing systems, processes, data, and people and be compliant with ESG. So you're not going to bring in new people, build new platforms, but rather you have to find a way to innovate, leveraging existing infrastructure. And the gap is filled by climate startups. They are able to offer agile, flexible solutions that fit like a module into your existing infrastructure and can help you accelerate your compliance towards ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance compliance framework for financial, social, and climate inclusion. So that's one area of work, working a lot with the data, ensuring the algorithms are not biased, and ensuring collection of large amounts of data are compatible to be climate compliant. The second area of work is the carbon credits that you mentioned, right? So one of the areas I do not work with is trying to buy carbon credits after you have polluted the environment. It's like, okay, yeah, I've done some negative impact. Let me put some money around it, buy some credits, and show that I am climate compliant on the books. Rather, I talk about not trying to emit more, but also working towards carbon credits so that you can balance in some shape or form, right? So emit less, but also whatever you are unable to control, use carbon credits, not necessarily just use carbon credits all the time. So I work with a lot of startups that are specializing in this space where they are able to tell you exactly how much you need for your own direct emission, your supply chain emission, and any third party or indirect emissions, and how you can buy carbon credits to offset emissions until you become 100% compliant. So ideally, you buying carbon credits should reduce year over year as you try to make your corporation compliant, not the other way around. Another area is incorporating artificial intelligence, both for financial inclusion as well as climate compliant, right? So both generate large amounts of data, and there are a lot of data and AI startups that specialize in software that help you to fix the gaps in systemic biased data, bring in different algorithms that are able to predict real-time patterns so you can mitigate risks ahead of time, not necessarily wait until after the occurrence to see how you can control the damage. And also AI is very much utilized in forecasting, right? So there are a lot of microclimate situations and similarly a lot of microfinance issues. So in both these aspects, we use artificial intelligence in a more ethical way so that data is collected responsibly, user privacy and security is maintained. Plus, also you expand access to finance and climate risk to all geographies, not just only your local community. So these are some examples of what I do. I don't do a lot in the infrastructure space because that's not my specialty.
Thank you for sharing a lot of great information there about the different areas that the companies can work with. You mentioned in the last one about bias and AI, and I think that is a really hot topic right now, especially, I think in previous interviews you were saying that's there's a lot of focus there just because of the, you know, explosion of OpenAI and ChatGPT there. Um, how, how have you seen especially early stage founders or founders in general, really work with that question of ethics and AI.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's very close to my heart. In fact, I was also able to work with the United States working group from the White House where they were defining AI regulations. Last year, gave some of my comments and inputs so they can incorporate into building safe systems, right? So, some of the work that I do with my startups in this space is number one, we are always focused on data. We do three types of data work. One is how do we put controls around data collection so that you are not infringing on the privacy of the user? We do a lot in the GDPR and the CCPA regulatory space. But more importantly, with the generative AI, we've also been doing quite a lot of synthetic data. Because with synthetic data, what you can do is you can anonymize some data. So if some user privacy will be breached, you do not have to collect that data. Rather, you can use synthetic data that can mimic that user profile. Also, because of the systemic bias in the past, there could be a lot of gaps in data because certain populations, like women of color, may not have been accounted for in your data set. So, synthetic data is a big area of work that we do recently with the generative AI. And lastly, what we have done is using AI and data for basic day to day problems, not necessarily solving the biggest financial crisis. Though I was at Lehman Brothers in 2008 when the financial crisis happened. Um, yeah. But simple things like creating digital identity for users who do not have a credit score. How can we simulate a user profile for filling the gaps for women who are applying for funding so that we can evaluate them for investment for alternate data, not necessarily for the data that they ideally should have, kind of changing the way in which we look at data and also enabling more funding for women and women led startups, not necessarily using systemic bias, systemic data, and systemic modeling to inhibit their growth. So, those are like two predominant areas where I work with.
So you're addressing these bias around AI because we've known for a long time where it's like, if you have good data in, then, you get good data. But a lot of this, like you said, there's bias around the data sets that these systems are ingesting. You're saying one way to counter that is actually synthetic data. Do they not run into the same problem of their modeling with biased data, and therefore they're getting
No, because I talk about using synthetic data for filling the gaps and removing the bias, not necessarily just create data in the air, right? For example, you are never supposed to use AI algorithmic decisioning without a human present in the room. If you are doing that, be it with or without synthetic data, you are never going to achieve parity in any shape or form. Likewise, using synthetic data, I'll give you an example also. It's not a bulletproof solution if you don't have proper ethical governance and human intervention in place. For example, a famous Wall Street bank, and I don't want to name names here, a few years back, acquired a company for several millions of dollars, but then later found out that that company showed them invalid synthetic data to make the deal. For example, a big investment bank has, uh, has not paid enough attention to a startup using synthetic data to make the deal successful.
Yeah. You
So,
mean the fake users? Is it that story that you're
yes,
addressing?
yes. So it was synthetic data at play. So it appeared credible, and even a very big investment bank overlooked that because they did not have proper controls or humans in the process or ethical governance in place to evaluate uh, those missteps. So I would say using synthetic data is technically a viable approach, but will not be ethical if there is no proper ethical governance or humans in the loop process.
A few weeks ago, there was that launch with Google, the Google Gemini. And I know this might be a controversial topic for a lot, but I would love to hear from you, like what you thought about that and what were some of the implications that you saw.
I'm not quite clear of that controversy. Do you mind explaining that to me?
Yeah, Google Gemini released their model, the second version or like the more advanced version of their Google Bard. I think it was like an image generation where they removed Caucasian, people from the model. And that was getting a lot of like traction and discussion online around how these models are being built. And I don't know if you have any comments on that. I was just very curious because it's very closely tied with what you were saying about like data and like, different data sets that are being used or different, ways that these models are being built.
Yeah,
It's all
yeah.
very opaque
But
for normal users like us.
it's not opaque. So I'll give you an example that I have used personally related to that, which is with OpenAI. We know the same image generation technology. I'm going to be literally asking it, not only me, a lot of my peers, we tested it together, where we wanted certain images of women of color who are in the middle age, right? A middle age group. But then it kept giving us images of um, women who are not diverse. We are not against um, women who are not diverse, but we also want inclusive people in the mix. So it kept giving that. And then when we gave additional instructions, it started giving us only women of color. It removed all the women of non-color. So then later on, we started poking it around, and then it again started giving women who are extremely young in age. It never came to our age group because apparently we are also discriminated by age, not necessarily race and color and gender. So that was an example that I have encountered personally when we were testing it with few of my peers. And that's why I say a human in loop approach is what I typically always recommend. One of the additional things we have done to prevent that, and I would not say we can avoid it 100%, is we do this model risk management. So that's a concept I learned on Wall Street. And we use that in AI also today, not only testing the models with data within your organization, but also test it with a lot of open source, public, diverse data sets that potentially may not have existed in your enterprise in the past. And also making it transparent as to how you make decision on something to your end consumer. You don't have to share sensitive algorithms or your proprietary modeling, but rather share who made the decision. Is it a machine or a human? And how the decision was made in simple human terms. Um, we do this model risk management and stress testing quite a lot to kind of limit bias in data and modeling. And I would not say we are 100% there, but that's an approach we follow.
Yeah, basically having the model confirm or like describe to you why they made these decisions. And these are different points of data points that you can get and say, okay, that is why the output was this. This is why the output was that. And you can start to track those changes.
Correct, correct. And I always emphasize, and I work on this quite a lot with my um, startup as well, where it's not about the technical team or the product team that's trying to fix the data bias or the algorithm bias. It actually starts from the C-suite. There should be a ethics and governance committee, not necessarily for AI, but for everything in the enterprise that should have guidelines as to how data will be tested, how we will ensure it's diverse if you don't have data in-house, and how you will ensure it is accommodating different stress testing in the modeling to eliminate bias to the best extent possible. And then report it transparently. You can say, hey, our model is only 93% compliant today. We are aiming to get to 100% in a year. And that's okay. Instead of telling, hey, this is what we generate and we are unable to share how we came up with that. So I think it starts at the C suite, and I talk about a lot in my startup.
Yeah. And I know this is only like, one conversation. I would love to just dive deep in the future about like individual, AI, climate, and DEI initiatives that you're working on. Are you ready for the rapid fire questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
The first thing I would love to know, a lot of listeners here are, immigrant founders or soon to be founders. So what is tactically really helpful for them is what visa status were you on when you started Bua's Impact Club?
I was a US citizen.
And you were, you went through everything from F1 to H1B.
Yes, I went through the entire process. So I was on Wall Street. When I landed on Wall Street, I was on a visa, on a short term visa.
Yeah.
Had to really work very hard to, that's why, learn things outside my scope of work and get to a place where I was able to apply for um, a green card. And then I got the green card, and then I applied for citizenship. And around that time is when I decided to launch my startup.
Awesome. A lot of the listeners are also earlier stage than, let's say, pre-seed, seed, or even Series A, especially if they're founders. And they're probably listening to this to be like, okay, I would love for my organization to, have an ethics a standard at the executive level for, let's say, AI or climate or even DEI. Um, I'm just trying to figure out how to survive as a company. What do you say to those founders?
Oh, yeah. So I would say you don't have to, reinvent the wheel or do everything to get started. So you can take small steps today. So with the current C-suite team or the founding team that you have, you can look at United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's extremely simple what you can do in small ways in the next 3 months with the existing team that you have, with the existing data you have. But you, as the founder, should have that vision to tell your team, hey, we need to prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to prioritize climate consciousness. We need to prioritize eliminating bias. So the direction you give will help them implement things in your current process. You don't have to form a brand new committee or try to bring in new processes and wait 10 more years to get started. Simple steps today can be easily achievable. And that's why I also help a lot of startups with my fractional C-suite role. So you may not be able to hire a lot of full-time C-suite people or experts in the space to get started, but you can always talk to someone who has already done this in their space for an hour or two in a month, evaluate what short change you can do in your enterprise today, starting with the people diversity. You can add one more diverse person on your team and go from there. It need not be, after a few years. You can do that tomorrow morning.
let's go with a couple more. So if I'm a startup founder and I am thinking about now that I'm not super early stage, I can start really developing the company culture. And one of my priority is to have a diverse company culture. What are some of the things that I can do as a founder to really build a diverse company culture?
So I think you should definitely have someone on your team focus on ethical governance. Ethical governance, it's not about data or AI or technology or fintech or climate. It's about prioritizing ethics in everything you do on a day to day basis. I'm sure you can find someone on your team already existing who can specialize in learning about things you can do for ethics in your industry. So you don't have to build a brand new committee, but if that is an option for you, you can have one or two team members from your C suite and your middle management to work together to identify three top ethics goals for our company in terms of governance over the next 6 months and try to achieve that. And also transparently report that to your stakeholders. And that would be a great start.
My last question is always, what are you optimistic about, Bhuva?
I'm definitely optimistic that even though we are struggling to achieve financial inclusion and climate compliance, there is a lot of interest in the startup space to make change in the community. And I think that is motivating large corporations to step back, take a look, and rethink their ways of working. And I'm optimistic about that. So I am thinking a lot of startups that come with a lot of innovative solutions are not just thinking about innovation, but also are thinking about inclusion and equity. So that is driving change in the legacy traditional corporations and big corporations, in my view. And that's an optimistic thing.
Yeah. We are also in the market of attracting talent and attracting customers. And one of the changes that people are asking for is this change.
Yeah,
Thank you so much,
exactly.
Bhuva, for being on the show. I had a great time talking to you about all the things you know. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andy. Thanks you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast app. One more thing, Foreign Founders is a new podcast, so please consider leaving a rating or review. That helps more people find the show. See you on the next episode.